No message, no calls, but still that person stays in your mind. It feels strange at first, because there is no contact, no notifications, no clear reason for their presence, and yet they are there. They remain in your thoughts in a quiet but steady way. You wake up, and before the world fully comes into focus, their energy appears in your mind. Not as a clear picture, not as a memory you actively choose, but as a feeling. A presence that is subtle, quiet, but persistent. You try to move through your day normally. You try to stay busy. You try to stay strong. You fill your time with work, conversations, noise, movement, anything that keeps your attention occupied. You tell yourself you are fine. You tell yourself you have moved on. And for a while, you almost believe it. But then, suddenly, without warning, their presence returns. Not invited, not expected, just there again. It can happen in the middle of anything. While working, while walking, while sitting alone. At night, when everything becomes quiet, when distractions fade and the world slows down, their memory feels louder. The mind becomes still, and in that stillness, they arrive again. Not necessarily as pain, not even always as longing, but as awareness. As if something unfinished inside you is gently trying to be noticed. You did not choose these thoughts. You did not plan them. You did not sit down and decide to remember this person, and yet they remain. And that is what confuses you. That is what makes you question yourself. You may ask why you are still thinking about them, why time has not erased this, why someone can feel closer in silence than others feel in presence. But the truth is not as simple as confusion. This is not weakness, this is not obsession, and it is not imagination. What you are experiencing is deeper than surface thought. It sits beneath normal memory and logic. Some connections do not stay on the surface of the mind. They exist beneath it. They do not depend on daily communication. They do not rely on messages, calls, or physical presence. Some bonds operate on a different level, where silence does not end them and distance does not erase them. When someone is meant to have a meaningful impact in your life, the connection does not simply disappear because communication stops. In many cases, silence reveals more truth than constant contact ever could. Noise can distract you from reality. Silence exposes it. If someone continues to appear in your thoughts without effort, without intention, without you trying to remember them, it often means they left an imprint on your emotional world. Not every thought is random. Some thoughts are echoes of something that once mattered deeply. Sometimes these connections begin long before anything is spoken, before explanations, before clarity, before understanding. And when something begins at that level, it does not always end cleanly. Even if the story feels incomplete, the emotional imprint remains. When two people connect on a deeper, emotional or psychological level, words become secondary. The mind may forget details, but the deeper system of emotion remembers what it experienced. The soul recognizes patterns before the mind can explain them, and that recognition does not disappear easily. There are often unspoken emotions involved as well, things that were never said, feelings that were never fully expressed, moments where something important was felt but not communicated. These unspoken parts do not vanish just because time passes. They remain stored internally. They quietly influence thoughts, reactions, and memories. Maybe you never told them how much they meant to you. Maybe you never expressed what they awakened in you. Or maybe they never expressed it to you either. Maybe things ended without clarity or closure. When emotions remain unspoken, the mind continues to revisit them. Not because you are stuck, but because something in the experience feels incomplete. The mind seeks understanding. The heart seeks acknowledgement. And until there is acceptance, the cycle of revisiting continues. Another truth is that this person changed you in some way. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Some people arrive briefly, but their impact lasts much longer than their presence. Some people come to shift your perspective, to awaken emotions you had not felt before, to show you parts of yourself you had not seen, or to push you into growth. When that happens, they become part of your internal story. You do not easily forget people who changed you. You do not erase experiences that reshaped how you think or feel. Their presence in your mind is not always longing. Sometimes it is recognition of transformation. Time does not erase emotional imprint. Distance does not remove it. It simply reduces external contact. But what was emotionally registered remains. Just like a scar on the skin reminds you of a healed wound. Memory reminds you of something that once affected you deeply. Thinking about someone does not always mean you want them back. Often it means they left something behind inside you. A lesson, a realization, a shift in awareness. And the mind revisits these moments not to pull you backward, but to integrate what was learned. Beneath awareness, something deeper is also happening. The subconscious mind does not hold on to people without reason. When someone keeps returning in your thoughts, it is often because your inner self is still processing meaning. It is asking questions quietly. What did this connection mean? What did I learn from it? Why did it affect me so deeply? This is not attachment alone. This is understanding forming slowly over time. Healing does not happen by force. It happens through integration. And when the meaning becomes clear, the emotional charge begins to loosen naturally. Silence plays a powerful role in this process. When communication stops, illusions disappear. You no longer receive mixed signals. You no longer hear explanations. You are left only with what was real and what was felt. In that silence, clarity begins to form. Sometimes this clarity is uncomfortable because it removes emotional fog. But it is also freeing because it shows you reality without distortion. Still thinking about someone does not mean you are going backward. It means something within you is still completing its internal process. Letting go is not one single moment. It is a sequence that unfolds over time. First you stop talking, then you stop expecting, then you stop hoping, and eventually you stop hurting. Each stage takes its own time, and thinking about someone during this process is not failure. It is part of healing itself. Your mind and heart also process things differently. The mind seeks logic and conclusion. The heart seeks meaning and emotional truth. One may say it is over. The other may still feel its significance. Both can exist at the same time without contradiction. Strength is not forgetting. Strength is understanding what something meant and still choosing to move forward. And one day, without force, the thoughts will become quieter. Not because you pushed them away, not because you distracted yourself endlessly, but because you processed them fully, because you understood, because you grew. And when that happens, you will realize something important. That person is no longer part of your present life. They remain only as part of your past, as a chapter that shaped you, not a place you are meant to stay in. Sometimes the reason someone stays in your mind is not because the connection is unfinished, but because it has changed form. Not every bond stays external. Some become internal reference points. They become part of how you understand emotions, relationships, and even yourself. Your mind may still return to them during certain triggers, not because you want them back, but because your system learned something through that experience. This is emotional imprinting. When an experience reaches a deep enough level, it reorganizes your internal world. It changes what you expect, what you accept, and what you recognize as emotional truth. And once that happens, the mind revisits the source of that imprint from time to time. Not to relive it, but to orient itself again. That person becomes a reference point in your emotional memory. Another important layer is that sometimes you are not just remembering them. You are remembering the version of yourself that existed when they were present. The way you felt, the way you saw life at that time. The version of you that was still forming through that experience. That is why thoughts can feel emotional, even without desire. You are reconnecting with an internal version of yourself that was shaped during that time. And as this continues, something deeper becomes clear. Sometimes, the person who stays in your mind represents a part of you that you were still discovering. They reflect something within you that was awakening at that time. Your emotions, your patterns, your vulnerability, your needs, your capacity to feel. They acted like a mirror, not showing who they were, but revealing who you were becoming. And once you see yourself in that way, you cannot fully unsee it. Even when they are gone, that reflection remains inside your memory system. That is why they return during emotional moments, during growth, during loneliness, during reflection. Your mind associates them with transformation, and transformation does not disappear easily. It leaves a lasting imprint. Sometimes there were also moments you did not fully express yourself, things you wanted to say but did not. Feelings you held back, thoughts you suppressed. These unexpressed moments do not disappear. They stay stored internally, not just as thoughts but as emotional states. And the mind revisits them not to punish you, but to complete what was unfinished. Completion does not always mean reunion, it means understanding. And when understanding arrives, emotional tension slowly dissolves. It is also true that sometimes the strongest connections are not the most stable ones. They are the most activating ones. They reveal emotional depth, insecurities, desires, fears, and patterns you were not fully aware of before. Intensity does not always mean compatibility. Often it means activation, and activation leaves a strong imprint. This is why time alone does not erase everything. Time creates distance, but understanding creates release. And understanding comes when you stop asking why you cannot forget, and start asking what this connection revealed about you. You are not only remembering the person, you are remembering meaning. You are remembering possibility. You are remembering what was never fully completed in story form. The mind struggles with unfinished stories. It returns to them again and again, searching for closure. But not all stories end with explanation. Some end with awareness, and awareness changes everything. As this understanding deepens, you begin to see that what you feel is not only about them. It is about what they activated inside you. Something in your inner world shifted through that experience. Some people enter your life not as permanent figures, but as catalysts. They arrive, create change, and leave. But the change remains long after they are gone. And even now, the reason they still appear in your thoughts is because that change is still unfolding inside you. Not because you are stuck with them, but because you are still becoming someone new because of what happened. And slowly, without forcing it, you begin to understand. They are not meant to be a permanent presence in your life. They were part of a transformation, a phase, a reflection, a turning point. And one day, their memory will no longer disturb your peace. It will simply exist as part of your history, a reminder that you felt deeply, learned deeply, and grew through it. And in that quiet understanding, the mind finally settles. A part of you surfaced around them, a part that felt more alive, more honest, more open, more intense, and more real than what you usually experience in daily life. That feeling can be confusing because it makes it seem like the person was the source of everything. But in truth, what you are really noticing is something deeper inside yourself. You are not missing them in the way your mind first believes. You are missing you. The version of you that came alive in that emotional space. The version of you that felt deeply, without filtering, without holding back, without trying to control every feeling. This is why, after certain connections, new people can feel less interesting or emotionally flat. It is not because others suddenly lost depth. It is because your inner world has expanded and changed. You are not the same person who entered that experience. Something in you has been awakened, and now your system is trying to understand the difference between who you were before and who you are now. This creates contrast, and that contrast can feel like emptiness, even when it is actually growth. Growth always changes perception. When awareness increases, your emotional standards naturally rise. When you have seen or felt something intense, your mind starts measuring everything else against it, even without you realizing it. Emotional awakening sharpens how you experience life. But there is a delay in adjustment. Your inner world does not immediately stabilize at its new level. So the mind keeps returning to the strongest emotional moment, as if trying to locate the exact point where everything shifted. This is also why memories of one person or one connection can repeat in your thoughts. It is not random. It is your psyche trying to process change. There is a quote often attributed to Carl Jung that says the soul needs your experience, not just your understanding. What this points to is simple. Growth does not come from being perfect or having full control. It comes from lived experience. It comes from emotional risk. It comes from moments where you felt deeply open, even if it was painful, even if it ended in confusion, even if it did not lead to anything stable or permanent. That kind of experience leaves a strong imprint, because it activated parts of you that were not fully awake before. And once those parts are activated, they do not simply disappear. Your system remembers the expansion, it remembers the depth, and it tries to make sense of it afterward. Another important truth is that the mind clings when the heart has not fully integrated the lesson. Integration happens slowly. It happens when you stop judging your own emotions, when you stop calling your feelings weakness, when you stop telling yourself that you should already be over it. There is no fixed timeline for emotional integration. There is only honesty. And honesty reveals something very important. You are not actually holding on to a person. You are holding on to meaning. Meaning is not something that disappears just because time passes or circumstances change. Meaning stays until it is understood. This is why replacing one person with another rarely solves the feeling, because replacement deals with absence, not understanding. And in this case, absence is not the real issue. The real process is emotional digestion. Your mind and heart are still processing what this experience taught you about connection, vulnerability, desire, boundaries, and self-worth. When that digestion is complete, the intensity naturally reduces. You do not need to force yourself to let go. Letting go is not something you do through pressure. It happens as a result of clarity. When understanding arrives, emotional tension begins to dissolve on its own. There is also a quiet fear that often sits underneath these thoughts. The fear that nothing will ever feel the same again. The fear that this was the peak of emotional depth for you. But that fear is based on a misunderstanding. The intensity you felt was not created only by the other person. It was created by the part of you that was activated in their presence. That part still exists within you. It did not leave with them. It is still available to you, but now it will express itself in a more grounded and stable way as you continue to grow. The mind often revisits the past when it doubts the future, and reassurance does not come from external answers. It comes from internal stability. It comes from trusting your own capacity to feel again, without needing to recreate the past exactly as it was. Another reason this person stays in your thoughts is because your emotional identity is shifting. When identity changes, the mind naturally reevaluates attachments. It asks who mattered, why they mattered, and what that says about who you are now. This can feel like fixation, but it is actually reorganization. You are not stuck in the past. You are restructuring internally. This is why emotional silence often feels intense before clarity arrives. When external distractions are reduced, internal truth becomes louder. And truth does not rush. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer, until it becomes clear enough to accept. You may notice that the emotional charge connected to the memory is already changing. It may not feel as sharp as before. It may not feel as heavy or as urgent. Instead, it may feel more distant at times or more reflective. That shift is a sign of healing. Not detachment in the cold sense, but healthy emotional processing. True detachment is not numbness. It is peace. And peace does not require you to erase memories. It requires you to understand them. At some point, thinking about that person will no longer create a strong emotional reaction. It will feel neutral, almost like observing something that once mattered deeply but no longer pulls you inward. That is when emotional processing has done its work. Not because you forced yourself to move on, but because your mind has fully integrated what it needed from the experience. There is another deeper layer here. Sometimes the mind holds on not because of the person, but because the experience triggered awakening. And awakening is rarely comfortable. It often comes with longing, confusion, emotional intensity, and loss. But once that awakening stabilizes, the external trigger is no longer needed. The psyche no longer depends on that connection to access the lesson. This is why thoughts slowly fade without force. They reduce not because they were meaningless, but because they have already served their purpose. They helped shape something inside you. There is also a difference between remembering someone and being emotionally attached to them. Memory is neutral. Attachment is charged with emotion. What you are experiencing is the gradual release of emotional charge that once needed expression. When that energy is not expressed in the moment, it circulates in the mind as repeated thoughts. But when it is finally acknowledged and allowed to exist without resistance, it begins to settle. Silence plays an important role in this process. Silence is not emptiness, it is space. And space allows truth to rise without interference. When there are no messages, no calls, and no external signals, your mind is forced to rely on itself. It can no longer depend on hope or imagination. It must face reality more directly. And what becomes clear over time is that the impact mattered more than the outcome. You are not haunted by a person. You are carrying the emotional imprint of an experience that shaped your inner world. That imprint fades only when it has been fully felt and fully understood. Distraction does not solve this. It only delays understanding. And anything that delays understanding also delays closure. The mind wants resolution. The heart wants acknowledgement. And acknowledgement does not require contact with the other person. Some connections enter life mainly to break internal illusions. Illusions about control, certainty, permanence, and expectations about how relationships should unfold. When those illusions break, it can feel painful. But that pain is part of becoming more aware. Growth often comes from seeing reality more clearly, even when it does not match what you hoped for. What you feared losing was not only a person, it was the meaning attached to them. It was the imagined future, the emotional possibility, and the sense of what could have been. Facing that truth is part of psychological maturity. Because real healing requires letting go of imagined futures, not just past experiences. This is also why patterns repeat in life. Similar emotional experiences may appear in different forms with different people, but the same underlying feeling. This repetition is not coincidence. It is the mind showing you something that has not yet been fully understood. When you finally see the pattern clearly, its emotional grip weakens. Awareness itself begins to dissolve repetition. There is also an energetic aspect to emotional release. When emotions are not expressed or understood, they stay active in the mind as thoughts and sensations. But when they are acknowledged without resistance, they naturally complete their cycle. Suppression keeps them alive. Awareness allows them to finish. Allowing does not mean feeding the emotion. It means observing it without fighting it. You can think of someone without reopening the emotional story every time. You can remember without re-entering longing. This is the difference between reflection and attachment. Healing is not linear. Some days feel clear, others feel emotionally active again. But overall, the intensity reduces over time. What matters is direction, not speed. As this process continues, something important begins to happen. Your identity starts separating from the experience. At first, it felt like the experience defined you. Now it becomes something you carry, not something you are trapped inside of. You begin to observe it instead of living inside it. And observation creates freedom. Gratitude often begins to replace confusion at this stage. You can acknowledge that something mattered without needing it to continue. You can respect what it brought into your life without wanting it back. This is emotional maturity. It does not erase feeling. It gives feeling a place in your understanding. Eventually, there is a quiet readiness for something new. Not desperation, not urgency, just openness. A grounded openness that does not need the next experience to repeat the last one in order to feel meaningful. That openness shows that your system has completed a major cycle. At that point, the mind stops asking why it happened and begins asking what comes next. And that shift signals internal closure. Not closure from a conversation, but closure from understanding. One day, you will notice that you can go long periods without thinking about it at all. And when the memory appears, it will feel distant and calm. Not painful, not urgent, just part of your past experience. That is when you know integration has happened. Because in the end, they were never meant to stay in your life permanently. They were meant to shape something in you. And what shaped you becomes part of your inner strength, your awareness, and your understanding of yourself. And that remains even after everything else fades.